Russian jets have ruled the skies for as long as many of us can remember. Names like the MiG-31, Su-24, MiG-21, and the Su-35 resonate with us just as much as the roar of their engines. These aircraft stand among the most advanced in the world, possessing capabilities that seem almost futuristic, even though some were built decades ago. And they've only gone and done it again. Meet the Su-57, Russia's first fifth-generation multi-role fighter. When it was initially introduced to the world, it appeared poised to dominate our skies. It was designed to be blisteringly fast, exceptionally agile, and heavily armed. Some even suggested it might outclass the American F-35. So then why is it that more than 3 years into an actual armed conflict involving Russia, we've seen barely any activity of it on Ukraine's front lines? So what happens when you look underneath the hood of this remarkable piece of engineering? Could it truly end the F-35's dominance? Or is it destined, like so many Russian planes before it, to crash and to burn? The altitude is high, but the stakes are higher. Grab your wingman and get ready for a dogfight. Just before we continue with the episode today, fantastic sponsor, and that's Incogni. Look, have you ever Googled yourself? You type in your name, you type in, I don't know, your city or something, and then you're like, oh, wait, why is my address there? Why is my phone? How are you getting my email address? Well, I'll tell you what, whenever you put that information onto a website or in some dodgy form, it's entirely possible that data will be bought and sold by data brokers, and that's why you get those random phone calls, that's why you get those spam emails, that's why terrifyingly your home address is out there on the internet. Well, Incogni, they scrub your personal data from the internet by automatically sending opt-out requests to 250 plus data brokers. Plus, they've got something new. It's an unlimited plan, so you can target websites as well, even ones that they don't already cover. And they're already covering a lot, 250 plus. You just copy the link where your information is exposed, you paste it into Incogni's dashboard, and they'll work to get it taken down. That's the custom removals feature, unlimited requests handled by real privacy experts. No hassle, no endless threads, just results. So, take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code MEGAPROJECTS at incogni.com/megaprojects to get 60% off an annual plan. And now back to today's episode. How to build a monster. Origin, doctrine, design. So, where's our story begin? Well, the Sukhoi 57, or Su-57 for short, can actually trace its roots all the way back to the early 2000s. Details remain somewhat hazy as the Russian government, not exactly forthcoming with military information, not exactly unexpected. But back in the early 2000s, the Russian military, or what was left of it after the collapse of the Soviet Union, was looking to upgrade its fighter aircraft fleet. The MiG-29 and the Su-27 jets were starting to show their age. Still dependable under the right circumstances, yet clearly outclassed by whatever terrifying innovation Lockheed Martin might have been dreaming up in a Nevada warehouse that week. The Kremlin needed a new project, not just one that would match the capabilities of the best US airframes in development, but one that could completely surpass them. Nicknamed the T-50, the project was launched around 2002 under the leadership of Sukhoi's chief designer, Alexander Davydenko. However, it was far from a one-man effort. Davydenko coordinated a collaborative project in conjunction with the Novosibirsk Aircraft Production Association and the Komsomolsk-on-Amur Aircraft Production Association, where the final assembly of the aircraft would be carried out. Various parts of the aircraft, for instance its avionics suite, were developed by a consortium of Russian defense and aerospace firms who were selected for the task as far back as 2003. It's unsettling to realize that some of our most advanced weapon systems only emerge after 2 decades of development. This fact makes you wonder what kind of space-age weapons are just beginning their development right now. Now, the design and manufacturing process spanned several years throughout the 2000s. Prototypes emerged around 2010, though numerous issues cropped up along the way. Engineers even discovered cracks in the airframes, hardly ideal for an aircraft meant to stay aloft and, not explode. Despite these setbacks, the Russian military and its designers persisted in refining the design and manufacturing process. In 2017, the aircraft was officially redesignated from the T-50 to the Su-57, NATO code Felon. Although the project experienced further delays due to ongoing manufacturing challenges, serial production is believed to have begun around 2022, marking Russia's first fifth-generation multi-role fighter. Even though we haven't yet seen many Su-57s, what we have observed is a pretty impressive piece of kit. So let's break it down. Alright, so how do you even start to quantify all of the different components on an aircraft this complicated? Well, it really helps to start by understanding 2 key aspects: context and doctrine. Russian air doctrine for designing fighter jets is generally based on the classic idea of what fighter aircraft have always been: air-to-air combat specialists with the flexibility to strike other targets as needed. When designing an aircraft, you can prioritize various factors, but where you concentrate your efforts will determine how the aircraft flies, fights, and what its limitations are. For the Su-57, priorities are speed, maneuverability, and payload. It's also important to consider the practical differences between a Russian jet and an American one. For example, satellite communication capability plays a significant role. While US satellite coverage is nearly global, Russian coverage is more limited. Because Russian fighter jets may not always be in constant communication with a satellite, having a fast aircraft becomes essential. This requirement affects the design focus for engines and fuel tanks, resulting in an aircraft like the Su-57 being larger and heavier compared to something like the F-35 Lightning. The aircraft measures 20.1 meters in length, has a wingspan of 14.1 meters, a height of 4.6, and a wing area of 78.8 square meters, which for a multi-role fighter, actually pretty big. It's larger than the F-22 Raptor, the F-35, the Eurofighter Typhoon, the Chinese J-20, and the Rafale. Moreover, it boasts a maximum takeoff weight of around 35,000 kilograms, making it pretty hefty for something designed to soar through the skies at high speeds. But don't be fooled by its size, because the Su-57 is seriously quick. The aircraft features a twin-engine design powered by two afterburning turbofan engines capable of delivering thousands of kilograms of thrust, which in scientific terms means it's really, really fast. At sea level, it can reach top speeds of Mach 1.1, that's around 1,350 kilometers an hour, even with maximum air resistance. As it descends to higher altitudes, however, where the air is thinner, its speed increases a lot. When operating at high altitudes, near its service ceiling of around 20,000 meters, the Su-57 can supercruise. This term means that the aircraft is capable of flying faster than Mach 1 without using afterburners. In fact, it can reach Mach 1.3, approximately 1,400 kilometers per hour in such conditions. With afterburners engaged, though, it can go even faster, and there's even a special emergency feature that allows the Su-57 to top out at around Mach 2. I think we should start referring to that capability as the "oh shit" button. Furthermore, the Su-57's engines are equipped with thrust-vectoring nozzles, which provide what can be described as super maneuverability and improved agility during combat. In theory, this allows the Su-57 to perform controlled, high-angle maneuvers that are critical for winning close-quarters engagements, as well as more flashy and less practical moves, such as the infamous Cobra maneuver. The Russian chief test pilot is reported to have said, quote, "It's like making a 5-ton fighter jet dance in the sky." We're not sure if that's a compliment, though. I guess it depends on how good he is at dancing. Anyway, with speed and maneuverability taken care of, what about payload? Well, you need weapons on a jet like this. I mean, otherwise all that fancy agility and speed would just be for a really good air show performance or something. And you'll be pleased to know that the Su-57 is armed to the teeth. For this purpose, the Su-57 is highly adaptable and can be fitted with a variety of weapons for any given mission, hence the term multi-role fighter. The jet is capable of carrying an array of missiles and bombs in its cargo compartments, all safeguarded by a major onboard defense complex. The pilot has access to 2 internal weapons bays within the main fuselage, offering the flexibility to choose between longer or shorter range missiles. Additionally, 2 smaller bays located near the engine nacelles help maintain the aircraft's stealth profile while still providing multiple options. External hardpoints on the Su-57 also allow for the mounting of other munitions if necessary. In total, up to 10,000 kilograms of ordnance can be carried in and on the aircraft. But it's not just a bomber. It also comes equipped with a 30mm autocannon capable of engaging mobile enemies and air targets, firing dozens of bullets per second and presumably turning enemy bodies into a fine mist. Lovely. Additionally, it can house smart as well as specialized dumb ordnance like anti-tank cluster munitions. Depending on its configuration, it can target air, sea, and ground-based targets. In short, it's a bit of a jack of all trades. And that's not all. Remember when I mentioned the aircraft's stealth profile? Not only is the Su-57 incredibly fast and armed with more weaponry than an octopus, but it's also stealthy. Sort of. Now, we mentioned before that certain aircraft design elements influence others, and when it comes to stealth, this concept really takes off. Since the doctrine prioritizes speed, agility, and payload, the radar profile remains relatively noticeable, especially given that the aircraft is much larger than other modern fighter jets. While the cross-section from the front is quite reduced, that advantage is less pronounced from other angles. Additionally, mounting external weapons on the hardpoints increases its visibility to radar systems. That said, there are several design features in place to mitigate these effects as much as possible. For starters, the exterior of the aircraft boasts a pixelated design composed of black, light grey, and dark grey squares, which, according to experts, not only enhances its stealth capabilities, but also gives it a cool, modern look. The airframe is made of composite materials coated with radar wave-absorbent layers, further reducing its detectability on radar screens. Additionally, the internal weapons bays contribute to its ability to supercruise stealthily. So, is it completely stealthy? Not really, it's stealthish, sort of like a clumsy ninja. But if you thought that was all, you're sorely mistaken, as the final cherry on top of this particularly violent cake is the aircraft's avionics and electronic warfare suite. This system introduces some eye-catching advancements by Russian fighter standards. Its radar system delivers high-precision, multi-target tracking, allowing a single Su-57 to engage several entities simultaneously. Moreover, its electronic countermeasures system boosts survivability by detecting, jamming, and countering a wide variety of threats, all while being equipped with conventional countermeasures like flares and chaff. Its optronic targeting system includes an infrared search and track feature that passively detects targets while maintaining stealth, along with friend-foe identification measures. In addition, the aircraft is equipped with a secure, high-speed communications system that enables real-time data sharing with both the pilot and air coordinators during combat. The cockpit features a helmet-mounted display which provides pilots with essential data and combat information through augmented reality, allowing them to make swift, informed decisions and enhancing overall spatial awareness. So yeah, it essentially functions as a slightly less high-tech Iron Man helmet, minus the AI butler. Finally, and importantly, several elements of the Su-57 feature a modular design allowing for upgrades and development throughout the aircraft's lifecycle. This approach ensures that even as combat evolves, the aircraft can maintain maximum battlefield effectiveness by staying current with emerging technologies. Such future-proofing is a sensible strategy for a complex and costly platform, especially given that Russia's Air Force must extract maximum value from its fighters within the confines of a limited budget and a finite number of airframes. CEO of the Russian United Aircraft Corporation, Vadim Barakar, stated that as the Su-57 production continues to expand, new features will be integrated into the airframe. He explained, and we'll quote him here, "The Su-57 platform has been designed for a lifespan of at least 40 to 50 years. It features an open architecture that supports a wide range of technologies with minimal changes to its core systems. Integrating unmanned aerial vehicles with the Su-57 will become a central element of future combat systems. Over the coming years, new features will be added to the serial production models as part of the modernization program." The quote ends. This is a sound long-term strategy. For example, the American F-15, whose first test flight took place in the early 1970s, remains in service today because of many successful upgrades that have been implemented over the years. But comparing the Su-57 to the F-15 is not where the Russian military want to be. They're aiming for the pinnacle, the best of the best. They're essentially aiming for the F-35. And if you take a shot at the king, you best not miss. The F-35, utility, capability, lethality. So, based on what we know about the Su-57, how does it stack up against arguably the most advanced aircraft ever flown? Well, firstly, you might wonder why we're not comparing the Su-57 to the F-22 Raptor, the F-22 being the more dogfight-focused speedster similar to the Su-57's own performance. For a discussion solely about the flight, that comparison would make sense. However, today, we're addressing more than just flight performance, including its real-world implications. The F-35 is said to be the premier jet for the US military for the foreseeable future, and the Su-57 will play a similar role for Russia. In reality, an Su-57 is much more likely to encounter an F-35 than an F-22, simply because there are more F-35s in service. Moreover, the slightly different designs between the F-35 and the Su-57 make for a more interesting comparison, and if you want, you can argue with us in the comments below. So with that in mind, when comparing the Su-57 to the F-35, we'll begin by discussing the differences in doctrines and operational concepts. Next, we'll examine several key specifications side by side, and finally, we're going to delve into the design features that set these two jets apart. As we all know, there are no free lunches in aircraft design, only trade-offs based on what a flight doctrine prioritizes. In that regard, the F-35 is distinctly different from the Su-57. The F-35 was developed with a specific concept of warfare in mind, an all-in-one, integrated, and interoperable airborne weapons platform. Its primary focus is on stealth, electronic warfare, and seamless battlefield integration, sometimes at the expense of traditional fighter priorities such as speed and agility, which are more characteristic of the Russian designs like the Su-57. That said, don't get me wrong, an F-35 can still outperform many planes in a dogfight. Its design, however, was optimized to achieve peak effectiveness on the modern battlefield rather than relying solely on conventional fighter attributes. The Su-57, as mentioned, is the largest multi-role fighter on the market today. That's got both upsides and downsides. It's physically larger than the F-35, it's almost 5 meters longer and 4 meters wider. Its larger size, however, allows it to house 2 engines compared to the F-35's single engine. This design advantage is crucial for Russian doctrine, as it enables the Su-57 to be much faster than the F-35. The Su-57 cruises at just over Mach 1.1 and could supercruise around Mach 1.3. The F-35, on the other hand, tends to cruise at Mach 0.95, although some claim it can supercruise at Mach 1.2 when needed. While the Su-57 tops out at Mach 2, the F-35 reaches Mach 1.6 at peak power with afterburners engaged. In terms of speed, well, clear edge to the Sukhoi there. The Su-57 might also be more maneuverable, but that's difficult to assess without an actual dogfight to see the outcome. The chief test pilot of the Su-57 claimed that its agility could provide an advantage over the F-35, although do take such comments with a heavy pinch of salt. After all, the F-35 also features thrust vectoring capabilities in its engine, allowing it to perform all the fancy tricks that the Su-57 can. The difference in speed and agility reflects the distinct design philosophies shaped by each nation's unique requirements for such an aircraft. The Su-57, for instance, is designed to fly higher than the F-35, a feature that contributes to its high speed and is made possible by its larger size that accommodates multiple engines. However, this design choice does come at a cost, making the Su-57 considerably more fuel-intensive in comparison. Its effective combat radius, which is the distance the aircraft can take off, complete its mission, and return without refueling, is around 1,250 kilometers. While this range is impressive and increases significantly when the aircraft is not in combat, the F-35 jumps into a different league entirely. With an effective combat range of 2,200 kilometers, almost double that of the Su-57, the F-35 clearly has the edge here. The short answer to why this is the case is aircraft carriers. Russia has none that work reliably and isn't as dominant on the world stage as it once was, so it doesn't need to project its air power far beyond its borders. Instead, it requires a system that can deliver a powerful, fast strike in a short amount of time before returning to the safety of the motherland. By comparison, the US, hyperbolically speaking, has 1 million aircraft carriers and projects its influence all over the globe, delivering an explosive dose of freedom to whoever the White House isn't pleased with that week. Its aircraft are built with good range and fuel efficiency in mind, enabling them to carry out missions over long distances from carriers and various Air Force bases around the world. In fact, the F-35 Type C variant is designed specifically for use on aircraft carriers, while the Su-57 couldn't even take off from Russia's carrier, the Kuznetsov, not merely because it has been rusting away in dry dock for a long time, but because it is quite sensibly not designed for carrier compatibility. The F-35 is predictably much stronger in the one category that it prioritizes, and which the Russians don't: stealth. The extensive array of stealth features on the F-35 makes it nearly invisible on radar when necessary, meaning it can more easily penetrate enemy air defenses than the Su-57, which, by comparison, might as well be flying around glowing like a giant neon sign. This advantage benefits it in all types of engagements, from air-to-air dogfights to air-to-ground attack and sea attacks. To echo the words of the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The Russians can't hit what they can't see. 2-1 to the F-35 then. Regarding weapon systems, the aircraft are probably neck and neck, each equipped with a diverse and flexible range of armaments that can be tailored mission by mission. The Russian systems are slightly older, but after all, a bomb is a bomb, it still goes bang. But when it comes to electronic warfare capabilities and countermeasures, there's no contest. The Su-57 is impressive, even a significant advancement for Russian technology. But the F-35 is often called a sensor platform. In fact, it is one of the most advanced pieces of electronics ever developed. Its radar is among the most sophisticated ever integrated into a fighter aircraft, and its electronic countermeasure capabilities are second to none. The F-35's advanced array system can map the ground, monitor weather, and even spot targets up to 100 miles away to engage with laser-guided missiles. While the Su-57 often boasts out-of-sight firing capabilities, it simply does not compare. The F-35 is equipped with 6 sensors that provide complete 360-degree awareness. The pilot wears an advanced helmet with an Iron Man-style heads-up display that continuously feeds information between the cockpit, satellites, AWACS planes, and command centers, ensuring that everyone remains fully aware of the situation around the jet at all times. It can engage multiple targets simultaneously, synchronize with unmanned drones, and it is incredibly difficult to hit, largely because it's just so bloody hard to detect. This combination of features makes the F-35 exceptionally effective in combat. You don't always have to be the fastest to be the most dangerous. In this comparison, the Su-57 just does not stack up. 3 points to 1 for the F-35 then. The F-35 even has a variant capable of vertical takeoff and landing, which can prove useful in various combat scenarios. Overall, the F-35 can perform 99% of what the Su-57 can, while the Su-57 can likely only reach 75 to 80% of what the F-35 is capable of. So, will it dethrone Freedom Airlines? No, probably not, although it may narrow the gap as its development advances throughout its service life, and it's no shame to finish second to such a remarkable machine. Also, an F-35 costs roughly twice as much as an Su-57, indicating that there are additional limitations and factors at play. However, Uncle Sam's military budget seems to be effectively unlimited, and regardless of cost, the F-35 remains the superior aircraft overall. On paper, even though many dismiss the Su-57 as just the latest misstep in Russian aircraft development, it does offer useful capabilities across the board. While it isn't a true match for the F-35, it should still be respected as a 5th-generation fighter in its own right. But if you noticed how much time was left in today's video, you probably knew a but was coming. You see, the Su-57 has issues. It faces real, practical limitations on battlefield effectiveness. On paper, the aircraft may seem impressive, but wars are not fought on paper. That medium leaves out key details and context, ultimately revealing that the Su-57 is much weaker as a weapons platform in practice. Problems with the Su-57: economies, sales, production scales. The first thing to consider, and arguably the Su-57's biggest problem, is the difficulty Russia has had in ramping up production. The Su-57 suffered numerous delays before finally entering serial production in 2022. However, what was once a 3-day special military operation in Ukraine has since devolved into a 3-year military quagmire. As Russia's war economy pivoted, the heavy sanctions it still faces prevented it from procuring the parts and advanced electronics required to quickly build advanced 5th-generation fighters. These include advanced arrays, radars, optics, AI elements, software communication systems, and air weapons, just to name a few. As a result, Russia is unable to produce Su-57s swiftly or to scale up production efficiently, leading to a total number that remains quite low. A recent government order indicated that Russia intends to have 76 Su-57s by 2030, though the current count is unknown and undoubtedly much lower than the target. In comparison, Lockheed Martin recently stated that there will be 600 F-35 airframes across the European continent by 2030. It doesn't take a mathematical genius to see that 600 is a lot bigger than 76, which does not bode well for the Kremlin's prospects. And it's not just that Russia needs these planes for its own military, although that's true. It also needs the ability to market and sell them to other nations. Countries often recoup development costs and generate revenue by selling weapons platforms to allies and other buyers, a practice both Russia and the US have followed since the Cold War. For example, this approach partly explains why so many guerrilla rebels across the globe are armed with various versions of the AK-47 assault rifle. It might come as a surprise, but in order to sell a product, that product usually has to exist first. In this case, the bottleneck in producing the Su-57 is affecting potential sales. In 2018, India was even set to co-produce the Su-57 with Russia, but disagreements over costs and technology sharing led India to withdraw from the project. This situation creates a catch-22. It's difficult to sell planes that don't yet exist, yet Russia may need those pre-sales to finance the production of the planes. Without that cascading cycle of production and sales, the expansion of Russian production of the Su-57 is unlikely to progress much further anytime soon. There is no Amazon next-day delivery when it comes to getting something as advanced as this into the air. And it's even harder to sell your plane to your allies when it hasn't been well received in the public eye. Perception is reality when you don't really know how planes perform in combat. We'll get to that in a minute. In 2019, the Su-57, amid massive delays, also crashed during a test flight, which postponed its handoff to the Russian Air Force that year and certainly didn't have countries lining up to put their own pilots inside them while paying for the privilege. Even if the Su-57 is safer now, and that incident was just a one-off, perception remains reality, further affecting both sales and production. When the aircraft went on tour to a Chinese military air show in late 2024, it was relentlessly mocked because the Russians sent a prototype that looks like it had been glued together by a 7-year-old doing arts and crafts. It was not a good look. Seeing cracks in the fuselage of prototypes, exposed screws in various areas, and other manufacturing defects reveals a troubling approach to production. It points to a manufacturing standard that seems to insist good enough is good enough, a mindset many argue does not belong in the realm of fighter jets. Dr. Matthew Schmidt, Associate Professor of National Security at the University of New Haven, expressed his concerns about the overall Russian aircraft production system quite clearly when he stated, quoting, "Russian aircraft may be well designed from a basic aeronautical standpoint, but the manufacturing technology and the materials technology is subpar." Ouch. Furthermore, the F-35 poses a significant export market challenge due to its ready availability. When you're part of the exclusive club possessing a fifth-generation fighter, there's little need for an Su-57. Moreover, the number of countries that can integrate into Russia's weapons platform shrinks until a completely new development cycle is required. Gaining access to the legendary F-35 club means entering the US's inner circle, a sign of strong allyship. Few nations want to be perceived as significant allies of Russia these days, especially given the war in Ukraine. After all, people generally disapprove when countries invade their neighbors. While Iran, North Korea, Algeria, and a few others have shown interest, the market remains modest. With the F-35 available right now as an all-around superior aircraft, it's hardly surprising that Russia struggles to shift its own offerings and kick its production cycle into gear. Not to mention, one of the key factors that makes the Su-57 such an attractive prospect is its modularity and potential for continual upgrades with the latest systems. However, it's one thing to promise ongoing development of your fighter jet and quite another to execute those upgrades at scale. This represents a costly commitment by Russia for the next 40 to 50 years of the aircraft's life cycle. Given Russia's, let's call it, lax approach to evolving its weaponry over time instead of merely deploying outdated Soviet technology, it remains to be seen how the Su-57 will perform in the future. Will it eventually be sidelined as too expensive to upgrade? We've witnessed T-34 tanks and Mosin-Nagant rifles used in Ukraine, and now we're expected to believe that Russia can keep an entire fleet of fifth-generation fighters updated with the most advanced technology, much like the US does? Perhaps I'm just a cynic, but personally, not really convinced of that. Even if Moscow were capable, and assuming the war supply chain functioned efficiently, the challenges would remain immense. The Russian military, at least before the conflict in Ukraine, was steeped in corruption, with a culture of personnel stealing anything they could in order to sell it. There were even instances where soldiers removed components from vehicles, rendering them inoperable. Although conditions may have improved somewhat since the Ukraine conflict began, a glance at how poorly maintained the Moskva, the former flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, was at the start of the war speaks volumes. One might even rightly suggest that Moskva now stands for Russian Coral Reef. Nevertheless, the point remains. If corruption and poor maintenance plague the Su-57s to a similar degree, these advanced aircraft may not even get off the ground. The issue is compounded by the significant challenges potential customers face when integrating the Su-57 into their own militaries. It isn't as simple as purchasing an aircraft off the lot. Comprehensive systems, software, communications, training, and strategy need to be meticulously planned and coordinated. All of these factors will likely lead to further delays. The expense is cascading as well. Many people might not know that most fighter aircraft pulling massive levels of Gs and traveling over Mach 1 require extensive maintenance. For example, F-35s experience critical failures every 11 flight hours, which isn't very long, and for every flight hour, an F-35 needs between 4 and 8 maintenance hours. And that doesn't even include the engines or the sensors, which can take much longer to fix. All of those technicians and specialists have to be paid too, not just the pilots and flight instructors, which further drives up costs. If the Su-57 comes anywhere close to these figures, as it should, given that it's a fifth-generation fighter, Russia's going to have a major problem. To maintain fifth-generation aircraft, you need money and you need skilled people. People who really know what they're doing. As we've already established, Russia's economy isn't well suited for building fifth-generation fighters. Moreover, many young men who could repair these planes have either fled the country or been sent to the front in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Russian military has already lost a significant number of pilots in the conflict. This shortage of skilled personnel will be very difficult for Russia to resolve quickly or while the war is ongoing, further limiting production until the fighting stops or another solution can be found. But as far as we know, Russia hasn't lost any Su-57s in Ukraine, at least not in the air. One was allegedly destroyed on the ground in June 2024 by Ukrainian long-range drones. The fact that we haven't seen any Su-57s shot down during air combat simply reflects that there have been very few of them present. This adds weight to the idea that either there aren't many in service or their stealth technology is far superior to what we originally thought. There's another revealing point regarding the Kremlin's claims that the Su-57 has been used in strategic strike missions. In reality, there's little evidence so far that these missions extended beyond a supporting role in uncontested airspace. In other words, the aircraft hasn't been combat tested in the traditional sense. After all, this is supposed to be a dogfighter. It's meant to engage in aerial combat, yet most of the time we only hear reports of it serving as a mobile airborne artillery platform. It launches long-range strikes at targets from many miles away before quickly leaving the area. And look, I appreciate the effectiveness of artillery as much as anyone. It's often hailed as the king of the battlefield, but these jets cost tens of millions of dollars to develop, manufacture, and operate. Surely there must be better use cases for such expensive assets than have them function as just high-cost long-range guns. The Russian military is understandably cautious with the Su-57. Just consider our video on manpads. It clearly demonstrates how easily these advanced, high-speed machines can be shot down. With only a limited number of Su-57s in service and production moving at a sluggish pace, replacing any losses becomes a formidable challenge. At the same time, the military must grapple with the fact that this platform is being marketed to nations around the globe. It hardly sends a buy now full price message when one of these fighters is shot down by a 20-year-old armed with a shoulder-mounted pocket rocket, a weapon that costs only a fraction of an advanced fifth-generation fighter. Now, while losing a single Su-57 might not drastically affect battlefield outcomes, the blow to its reputation is something the Kremlin can ill afford if it hopes to sell these aircraft internationally. In that sense, the Su-57 has become almost too valuable to risk in active deployment. Yet this creates another problem. If a fleet of fifth-generation fighters can be grounded by just a handful of manpads, then perhaps investing in them isn't a wise decision at all. It's a vicious cycle for the Russian Federation. They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. In theory, there's almost nothing fundamentally wrong with the Su-57. In practice, however, you can't have many of them, they're slow to produce, their operational scope is limited, and they can still be detected on radar or taken down by manpads. Additionally, there aren't enough trained personnel to maintain them, they aren't as efficient as alternative platforms, and their direct competitor outperforms them in nearly every aspect while being more readily available. That is simply the harsh reality. If they can assemble a fleet and begin selling these aircraft around the world, it would help get the ball rolling. It would also be beneficial if the Su-57 could be successfully utilized in combat at least once or twice against enemy aircraft. Until then, the Su-57 is practically less a near-peer competitor and more of a flying marketing gimmick that shoots missiles with an Iron Man helmet. The Su-57 today: politics, combat, limbo. So, where's that leave us? What is the current state of the Su-57 and its potential markets around the world? Well, as mentioned earlier, despite the many challenges surrounding the Su-57, several nations, mostly those allied with or looking for closer ties with Russia, have shown considerable interest. China, for instance, has its own fifth-generation program and doesn't need the Su-57, but Iran has expressed interest as of mid-2025. North Korea might follow suit, and Algeria has even stated that it will be one of the first nations to order Su-57s from the Russian government. One can only hope they won't require too many. Regardless of the uncertainties in potential sales, Russia has persisted in showcasing the aircraft's capabilities at various military air marketing events around the globe. It isn't combat, but it is something. India stands out as perhaps the most interested potential customer. Over the years, India's purchased a significant amount of Russian military equipment to support its growing, modernizing army. For example, the Indian Air Force already operates 260 of Russia's Su-30 aircraft. This existing relationship suggests that integration, at least on the communication front, might not be a major hurdle. However, incorporating any fifth-generation fighter into a military that did not originally design it is just never simple. A country must be deeply committed to acquiring an advanced multi-role fighter. The good news for Russia is that India clearly is committed, and any potential order from the Indian military would likely be substantial. Such a deal could give the Russian production profile of the Su-57 a significant boost. Typically, an order for the Su-57 would also include some production rights, meaning that Russia would share its fifth-generation technology with New Delhi, allowing India to manufacture the aircraft themselves. In an interesting twist, India would eventually not need to buy large numbers of the aircraft from Russia, as it could produce them locally over time, a move that benefits New Delhi. At the same time, India could legally and quickly source the majority of the components that Russia finds difficult to acquire due to sanctions. This arrangement offers a potential backdoor for Russia to scale up production significantly, possibly accelerating output if India is willing to take such a risk on the international stage. The bad news for Moscow is that they aren't the only kids on the block. India has its own planes. The US has also been sniffing around and offering the F-35 to India as well, with US President Donald Trump meeting Indian President Narendra Modi to propose the platform wholesale. It's considered a superior aircraft overall, and when it comes to expensive fifth-generation fighters, you really do want the best. In fact, such a deal even reached the proposal stage as of March 2025. However, this offer appears to be more symbolic than practical from India's perspective. The integration challenge would still persist with the F-35, and it comes at a higher price tag too. China is a more distant option, with its own fifth-generation stealth multi-role fighter, but given that the two countries couldn't even share a sandwich at the moment, it seems unlikely they'll be casually swapping cutting-edge military technology like Pokemon cards. And then there are the political implications to consider. India is keen on avoiding reliance on any single nation for the supply of critical parts for these important aircraft. Ideally, India would prefer to develop and produce its own fighter, which is why it previously collaborated with Russia to jointly develop the Su-57. A production rights-based deal is therefore very appealing to India. In short, the Su-57 makes sense for many reasons, but India first needs the stability and reassurance that it can manufacture the aircraft in-house without restrictions, a goal complicated by its current strained relationship with Russia. Meanwhile, the Indian military is still trying to catch up on the global stage. It requires a system that can equal or surpass those used by its regional rivals, China and Pakistan. In theory, the F-35 meets that need. Given that India has spent $20 billion on US military hardware since 2008, there appears to be a spending pattern that favors Washington. However, this option is not ideal either, as the F-35 lacks the production rights element available with the Su-57, a factor that holds greater importance for India. India could ultimately determine whether the Su-57 is remembered as a capable fifth-generation fighter or dismissed as an expensive failure that Russia simply could not market effectively. At the moment, Russia remains the only country with any operational Su-57s, so any potential sales are a step in the right direction. Recent developments have shown a slow diversification, with a few one-off variants emerging from the original design. While these models are not true vertical takeoff and landing jets, their presence marks progress. Production continues, albeit gradually, with 2 new Su-57s delivered to the Russian military in April 2025. However, the aircraft still faces production delays, resulting in only a limited number of units on the assembly line. Overall, the Su-57 will never really be given a fair shot. It's built by a country that is currently under-equipped to sell, market, service, or even properly use the aircraft for its intended purpose. People see grainy images of one that was destroyed in Ukraine and celebrate the moment, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But perception is reality. This is a slightly dated, yet capable multi-role fighter jet coming from a country whose image is at an all-time low. On the other hand, we can debate hypotheticals and perfect use case scenarios all day. We live in the real world. There remain a myriad of challenges that Moscow must address if it ever hopes to make the very expensive project worthwhile. While perception undeniably holds power, reality is unyielding, no matter how much the Kremlin might try to ignore it. Perhaps the Su-57 will never be given a fair shot, even though it is impressive in theory as a piece of military hardware. If the factories can't be staffed to build them at any reasonable speed, if they can't be flown in real combat scenarios, and if they can't be maintained properly, then maybe it doesn't deserve that shot after all. As for me, I'd take an F-35. Thanks for watching.